I'm glad that you all are here with us on our very first and exciting day of remote meeting for Opera for Educators. In just a moment, we're going to have Nandani Sinha talk to us about math and music. Known for her passionate performances and dynamic presence, mezzo-soprano Nandani Maria Sinha is an internationally acclaimed and multiple award-winning singer of German and Indian descent. A favorite on Southern California stages, Ms. Sinha has performed with the LA Opera, Long Beach Opera, Opera Santa Barbara, The Industry, California Philharmonic, Redlands Symphony, and many others. In recent seasons, Ms. Sinha appeared on stage as Lily and Our Lady in Golden by famed Hollywood film producer Nathan Wong. She created the role of Nettie in Brooke DeRosa's Gunfight at the Not So Okay Saloon, Producers Award and Best of Hollywood Fringe Festival Award winner, and appeared as Ella in Dick's Romance Sonambulo, a flamenco opera. She just finished performing in The Industry's Sweetland, where she created the role of Drum and Hear. She has had multiple collaborations with LA Opera, including as an Opera for Educators soloist and lead teacher for their Saturday mornings at the Opera singing workshops. Recently, she was honored to return as a soloist for Renee Fleming's Music and the Mind workshop and concert. Future plans include Filipievna in Eugene Onegin with Karen Wolverton and Samuel Ramey at Opera Santa Barbara, the alto soloist in Vespere Solemnis de Confessor with the Joanna Medwar Noscheff singers, and the alto soloist in Handel's The Messiah. Ms. Sinha also has a thriving studio in Pasadena where she teaches voice, piano, and music theory. For more information, please do check out her website. And now, Nani, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey guys, thank you. Oh man, I hate having my bio read at me. It's an interesting thing, but also a fun thing. But after all that performing, you get to know music quite well, and I'm lucky enough to teach it as well at a private studio, and I teach for LA Opera with Voices for Tolerance and the awesome programs that they have there with music for secondary in-school and elementary in-school operas, and it's truly a joy to be able to bring music as a comfort and also as a skill set to people. It's truly an incredible skill set. Now, I have a quick question for you guys before we start. I know we're doing the math of music, but how many of you are math teachers, and how many of you what levels are you teaching math? Just so this way I can give you some very specific ideas. I know you guys are looking for content, but this way I can give you very specific ideas for your grade level. So I'll just give you a second if you guys either want to chime in via chat, or if you want to, I think you're all muted. So if you just want to chime in via chat to let me know what grade levels you're working on, and if you are math teachers, or if you are fifth grade math with a general, Susan, fifth grade math with the general ed classroom, middle school, eighth grade mentor teacher. Thank you guys. General ed elementary, 6 through 8 instructional music. Thank you. Thank you guys. Okay, so I want to be able to give you guys very specific things also. And kindergarten and general ed, perfect. All right, so as we go, I have a lot of worksheets and things that I use with my private studio students, and also that I use with curriculum students that I teach at for LA Opera or other groups. And they've worked pretty well, and it helps bridge a little bit of the distance sometimes that happens between math and music. I always excelled at music, but then when I was younger and it came to thinking mathematically about music, I struggled. And it's something that I've seen a bunch of children struggle with. Part of it has to do with developmental stages, and part of it has to do with just sometimes there's not enough reinforcement. So I know for me, a lot of it had to do with reinforcement and making it fun instead of dry. So I know you all know this. But anyway, let me see if we can, let's get to the the sharing portion of life. And let me show you some of the PowerPoint that we've been working on. I also want to get to a point where we're going to do some we're going to do some rhythm, and we're going to do some singing by numbers together. So you can all see the screen that I'm sharing with you, correct? I'm going to go with a yes, right?
Yes, we can see it.
Great, I see that. Okay, chat, sorry. Okay, great, thank you. Perfect. So let's talk a little bit about the relationship between math and music. And forgive me if I'm gonna read it with you, but it's it'll keep us all on the same page. Math and music have always been considered closely related. By understanding beat, rhythm, and scale, you can learn how to divide, create fractions, and recognize patterns. Studies on young children show that their academic performance increases after a certain period of music education and training. It's in this great book that I read called The Correlation Between Music and Math, a neurobiological perspective, that I started reading when I was having a number of children in my studio who are on the spectrum, or one child in particular with very specific learning disabilities because there was complications during his birth. So this book, I highly recommend this book. It's kind of a great book. The reason for the increase in performance is linked to the spatial temporal reasoning. Spatial temporal reasoning affects the transmission or transformation of related mental images in space and time, symmetries of the inherent cortical firing patterns in the brain used to compare physical and mental images, and the natural temporal sequences of those inherent cortical patterns. So what it's really saying is the brain really likes patterns and likes to make sense of things with patterns. Areas of use during music education: the frontal lobe, the corpus callosum, occipital cortex, temporal lobes, and motor cortex. A lot more. And so when I'm teaching piano, your right hand is connected to your left brain, and your left hand is connected to your right brain, and there is so much cross-brain activity that happens because you have your eyeballs involved, you have your fingers involved, you have your ears involved. It's fantastic for the brain. Anyway, as we move on, mathematics. Here, why we're here. Mathematics means, sorry,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Would you mind making your presentation a full screen? So like hit it as a slideshow presentation.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Of course. All right, there we go. There we go. Math is clear and constant and has rules, much like music. It's abstract and logical, much like music. Practical mathematics has been a human activity from as far back as written record exists, much like music. What is music? Music is made up of melody, harmony, and rhythm. Melody, the singable flow of sound, it is the main voice that stands out from everything else. Harmony, and bear with me, these are very basic terms. There are other ways that you can define this, but I just had to find a way to define it for our purposes. Harmony, the overlapping notes that serve as a bass to the melody. For example, you play chords, or you play a bass line, or you play rhythmic patterns with the piano or the guitar, and then you sing the melody on top, or use another instrument, a saxophone, or whatever you will. Rhythm, the beat of time through music. Example, as a watch marks hours of the day, rhythm marks pace and time through a song. Sheet music orientation. For those of you that are unfamiliar, we're taking Happy Birthday. So here we have traditional sheet music. The top of it, the title. Usually at the right side, we have who wrote it, when they wrote it, and who the words are by. Over here on the left side where it says piano, you'll notice that there are, it's called the grand staff that holds the treble and the bass clef. Treble clef being that G-looking swirly thing, and the bass clef looking like a backwards C with two dots. Next to that, it looks like a little B, and that's called a flat. This tells us that we are in the key of F. This is our notation for that. It's called the key signature. Then right next to that is something called the time signature. And in this particular song, we are in 3/4. I'll get onto that in a little bit and let you know a little bit more about that in a moment. But then we have Happy Birthday. And this is what it generally looks like. Forgive me, I'm getting some messages. Someone take my watch off. You'll see the bass is on the bottom, usually played with the right hand, treble, and the left hand played with, bass played with left, treble played with right hand. So that being said, this is generally what sheet music looks like. I'm going to take us to another slide that kind of points everything out again, but just familiarizing yourself, if you're not aware of what we're looking at when we look at music, this is what it is. All right, so now we're going to talk about notes and how we express notes. A musical note can be expressed as a pitch name, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Frequency, which is how it vibrates per second, the amount of time it vibrates to hit your ear in air per second, and those are measured in hertz. Or we can measure it in ratios, because every single one of these notes has a frequency that travels. It's a sine wave that you would see, and the frequency of them depends on where they are in space. So for example, middle A, A4, if you look at a keyboard, the C in front of you, middle C in front of you, is called C4. If you go to the A above that, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 notes above, that's called A4. A4 always is at 440 hertz. It's a constant. If you want to go an octave above, octave meaning 8 notes above, the frequency is doubled. So then it becomes 880 and you have an A5. So that's just a little bit about, we'll get into the ratios of music in a second. Please let me know if you have any questions as I'm going, but I just want to leave it there for the moment. Music breakdown, how do we break down music? Pitches, scales, rhythm, and time signature is what we're going to be talking about today. And all of these things I want to give you ways of utilizing in the classroom. Even if you don't have a musical instrument in the classroom, or you are not a pianist or a guitarist or any other, are not proficient in recorder or anything like that, there are easy ways that you can use these pitches, scales, rhythms, and time signatures to either break down music or explain mathematical problems and equations. All right, we're going to get into scales and arpeggios. This is what I mean when I say scales and arpeggios. A scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Those are 8 different notes. You'll notice we start on C, we end on C. So that's our octave, right? And then below, you'll notice we can go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So we can go even higher, right? So that's 2 octaves. Major scales on sheet music. These are at the bottom of your screen. You're going to notice that that's the keyboard that I was talking about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 goes with the scale at the top, right? And then again, if you play guitar, the tab at the bottom. And these steps are made up of different tones or semitones. So between your first note and your second note on a scale, it's always a whole step, meaning that there's a white key and a black key. So there's always a whole step there. The next step between 2 and 3, again, a whole step because you have a white key and a black key. Then between 3 and 4, you have a half step because there is no black key. There are 2 places on the piano where there are no black keys. And that's between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. As we're going along, 4 to 5, whole step, 5 to 6, whole step, 6 to 7, whole step, 7 to 8, half step. And that's how you build a major scale in music. If we're going to get into the major scales, talking about tones and semitones, that's the same thing as whole steps and half steps. And I put this here just as a reference for you guys if you need it. I know we've been sharing our PowerPoints and stuff, so I just put this here as a reference. This is not anything that you really need to worry about right now, but C, D, E, F, G, A, B, all of our different scales and how to make a major scale out of it. Intervals in the scales. Intervals are based on simple ratios. Here we're getting into the math. So it's either a 1 to 1, 2 to 1, 3 to 2, 4 to 3. And the big deal about these ratios is has to do with early music preference for what they considered mathematically perfect. There were 4 perfect intervals in music that were described in early music, and it's based on their ratios. And these are perfect unison, 1-to-1, perfect octave, 2-to-1, perfect fourth, 3-to-2, perfect fifth, 4-to-3. And this gave rise to our ideas of harmony. Now, as we go, here's our ratios and scales. Octave, 2-to-1, perfect fifth, 3-to-2, perfect fourth, 4-to-3, major third, 5-to-4, minor sixth, 8-to-5, minor third, 5-to-3, and tritone, 64-to-45. These are our ratios for creating these intervals. So something that I have some of my students who are interested in sound frequency and science, this is the frequency of sound, I have them create tables and patterns based on, if I give you this pitch, how can you get to the next pitch based on these intervals and based on these ratios. So this is something that I have a couple of kids who really love the science of sound. And so if I give them A440 on the piano and I say your A4 is A440, I would like you to find either an octave or a perfect fifth. And on the right side of your screen is some of the math on how to do that. So we would, again, use fractions, which will get us anywhere. And this is a kind of advanced, but also a really fun brain teaser on how to figure out the ratios and the frequencies of music. So this is something maybe for some older kids or kids who have a real interest in sound frequency. So there is a little video that I would like to play for you. Oops, sorry. Ugh. But we'll get into that in a minute. First thing I want to talk about is Pythagoras. Pythagoras, he was the guy with the square and the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the square on the other two sides, that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And the interesting thing about Pythagoras is that I think today we would call him a mathematician instead of a philosopher. And these are just some fun facts about him, just for you guys, for your own information, for fun, that I got off of Fun Wikipedia and some other places. And he was a politician, and he was into religious teachings, and he had a communal sect, I guess, that lived in secrecy, and he was very much into the sacredness of numbers and of music and science. And his big contributions to music had to do with his figuring out the ratios and math of music. And it came out, he came up with something called the Pythagorean theorem of tuning. And so the story of it is that, according to legend, Pythagoras discovered that musical notes could be translated into mathematical equations when he passed blacksmiths at work one day and heard the sound of their hammers clanging against the anvils. Thinking that the sound of the hammers were beautiful and harmonious, except for one, he rushed to the smithy and began testing the hammers and anvils. He then realized that the tone played when the hammer struck was directly proportional to the size of the anvil, and therefore concluded that music was mathematical, thus giving birth to ratios. So another fun idea that you could do that's very easy to do. Have you guys ever seen a glass harmonica, where you just get glasses, wine glasses or cups, and you fill them with water? And it's, depending on the different ratios, you can make your own musical scale. I've done it with a couple of students, and I have a little packet on how to do it, which I'm happy to send to Andrea and send to you guys. But again, using ratios and water, creating a scale and then playing a song from that scale. A song as easy as Mary Had a Little Lamb, which I was going to teach you guys about later. If we sing, Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb, Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow. When you talk about the different intervals, I will send this to you guys too, we find that we start Mary Had a Little Lamb on 3. And so the numerical value of the numbers that we remember, we were talking before about how pitches have either names or they have hertz or frequency. You can also number the pitches 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 instead of C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So Mary Had a Little Lamb starts on E if we were going to play it in the C scale. Instead of saying E, D, C, D, E, 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 we would go 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 2, 2, 2, 3, 5, 5. Kind of simple, but that's something that you could put together with this glass. And instead of having anvils and smacking things, you know, the kids could create their own glass harmonica and, you know, just do some music with that. And all you need are numbers. That's all you need. All right, moving forward. Some relations and ratios. We're just going to talk a second again about Pythagoras. Pythagoras was excited by the idea that these ratios were made up of numbers. Pythagoras imagined a music of the spheres. And I know this sounds a little out there, but recently, I think it was Stephen Hawking who said that actually all the planets vibrate at a specific frequency. And so this guy Pythagoras wasn't too far off saying that there is a music of the spheres. In the 18th century, Bach was really big into mathematics, and he used mathematical equations in his bass lines. And it's kind of a cool thing. He also spelled out his name in the bass line and did all kinds of really neat things. So if you have a kid who's really interested in music and discovering things about composers and finding the hidden math in it, most Bach chorales, as well as the well-tempered clavier pieces, if you look at their bass lines, there are mathematical equations within them. And again, I'm happy to share that with you guys via Andrea. Philip Glass, another person who is very much into ratios and very much into the math of music. And I think last season we saw Akhenaten, and that was the music in there. He's very specific about the tones and the amount of times that particular patterns. Philip Glass is very much into patterns. So he was very particular about the patterns and how many times a particular pitch was played in a pattern. If you're interested in that, just listen to some Philip Glass and you can figure out what the patterns are. Some composers use the golden ratio and Fibonacci numbers to assist them in their composition. So the golden ratio being the number there on the screen and the Fibonacci numbers being the number there on the screen. Interesting ideas. If you can Google a number of these composers, or if you just put Fibonacci numbers and classical music, it gives you a ton of composers who used those equations to find mathematical harmonies and to create bass lines and to actually create structure and form in their music. All right, Bach and the well-tempered clavier. I want to talk a second about tuning. So the problem with the ratio in music when we were using the Pythagoras's theorem and tuning is that after the third time of multiplying out the numbers, you go out of tune with yourself. So eventually we came to the standard 12-tone equal temperament tuning, which is something, mean temperament tuning, which is what we use today. And the notes are separated by a logarithmical equal distance. It's about 100 cents. And it's the most common tuning system used in the world today. And it divides the scale into, instead of 8, it divides that 8 tones into 12 tones with equal ratio steps between them. So remember all those black keys that we were talking about when we saw the keyboard? Those also count. So those are your 12 notes. You have your, if you count chromatically, so white key, black key, white key, black key, white, white, black, white, etc. 12 tones. All right. Before that, we had something called modes. So this is just for your own particular reference. There's the Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian modes. So every single one of these modes has a different scale pattern, which I've put to the side for you. So notice Ionian starts on C. If we talked about the scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, every single one of these modes starts on one of those notes. Ionian being your C, Dorian starting on D, Phrygian on E, Lydian on F, etc., etc. If you get a chance and you have either a guitar or a piano and you feel comfortable, you can either play these out and you can hear them. And you'll notice we use a lot of these modes in different different styles of music. So it's kind of neat. And looking at the ratio of the scale patterns, whole tones and half tones, it's kind of interesting for a kid to puzzle out what makes it special. And that's generally a self-directed sort of play and watch sort of situation that I've encountered. All right, moving on. Circle of fifths. This is another part of math and music. Why can't we just, if I have a song and I'm going along and I'm playing in C, why can't I just keep it in C? Well, because a number of reasons. One, sometimes it gets boring, or two, sometimes the emotion of the song amps up. Think about what's the most recently, children have been wandering around my studio trying to sing Let It Go. And if you know the song Let It Go, toward the end of it, it gets even more heightened and she has a key change and she goes even higher, right, in the song. And so every single one of these songs has something called a pivot chord in it, where you can change to a different key and you can go a key higher. So instead of stopping the song, you pivot on a particular note and that'll take you to a new key. And so that being said, that's why, one of the reasons why the circle of fifths is very, very, very important. We call it the circle of fifths because we move up by a fifth in the scale. So if you start on C, C, D, E, F, G is your fifth, right? So you'll notice if we go to the right, we're going to read clockwise. The next note is a fifth above the C. Then for G, G, A, B, C, D, right? So we're moving by fifths. If you, it also gives you the sharps and flats of the key. Again, I leave this here for your reference, but an interesting thing that I like to do with my kids when we're doing some theory and we're doing some math is I ask them to transpose their music. So take Happy Birthday, for example, transpose it all up a fifth. So having that spatial relationship of what a fifth is and every single note being transposed up a fifth. All right, so the theorem of the circle of fifths came from Pythagoras. Again, linking it back to him. Rhythm, let's get into some rhythm. Rhythm measures time, measures the space between two bar lines on the staff, which represents the division of time by which air and movement of music are regulated. When you play a few different notes together, you even repeat the same note on an instrument, you create something called rhythm. So you guys have all heard of like a bass line or something like that. Sometimes it's the same note and it'll create a rhythm. All right, rhythm charts. Now, these are all here for your perusal. Whole notes and their rests and how many beats each of them get. This is a little bit of a different chart that I use when I talk to kids about who have trouble spatially understanding whole, half, quarter, eighth, and 16th. We talk about it like a pizza pie or whatever kind of pie you want. And the whole pie being a whole note, 4 beats. And if you half that pie, you get a half note, quarter, eighth, 16th. So just some spatial ideas of what the fractions of each of these notes are. And this is a worksheet from one of my kids that I had, fraction bars, drawing notes and fraction symbols in the box. And what does a whole note represent? What does it represent in a fraction? And what does it represent in a whole number? And then drawing it all out so they all can see. Counting methods. So I put all the different counting methods up here for you guys. I'm usually a metric counter. So I want to save a little time to do, okay, we're at 1:31. I want to save a little time to do some counting with you guys and making it interesting and fun. But you can either use Orff, Kodai, simple meter, or metric counting. I'm generally a metric counting person where one, and then if you go down to the next space, there are two notes connected with a beam at the top, and those are called eighth notes. One and is how we count it. Then if you go down the next level, you see 16th notes. So those are 4 16th notes, and every single one of these divisions is equal to one, so far is equal to one quarter note. So again, we're dividing, right? So that being said, these are all the different ways that we count it, so this we can make it accessible for the kids. Another, I'm very big on clapping and counting. So clapping with hands together, resting with hands apart. And it helps kids get their body involved. If their body isn't involved in counting music, they make a lot of mistakes. So if we're gonna count the 16th notes, 1, E, and et cetera, et cetera. And I know we're running out of time, so I'm just gonna keep cruising through. These are some worksheets that I put up here that I use with my kids. And this is the math worksheet that I use. And so it's figuring out what are the beats in each of these notes. And so if we're going to look over at the left side of our screen, you have a note with a hole in it plus a note that's filled in the center. So if we understand that the note with the hole in it is 2 beats, and we understand the note with the fill in the center is 1 beat, 2 plus 1 equals 3. Et cetera, et cetera. So this is just an example of some worksheets that I have for you guys for doing some math with the kids. Time signatures, a fraction-like pair of numbers found at the beginning of the sheet music. If we go all the way back to the beginning of the presentation, when I showed you sheet music orientation, the time signature was that fraction number right next to the key signature. And the top number indicates how many beats will be present in a bar. The bottom number indicates what kind of note is considered 1 beat. So if it's a 4, go back to your fraction thinking, what of 4 equals, what of 4 equals 1? So 4 quarter notes equal 1 whole, right? So it's telling you that the quarter note is getting the beat. If it's an 8, it's telling you that the 8th note is getting the beat. So the bottom, et cetera. Simple time signatures, 4/4, which are most pop songs, 3/4, which are waltzes, 2/2. If you guys think about Sousa's Stars and Stripes, bum 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 bum. Why? Why are most marches in 2/2? Because we have 2 feet. Right, left, right, left, right, left. Right? Compound time signatures include 6/8, Blondie, Call Me, 9/8, any Irish jig out there. If you guys listen to Riverdance, most of those are 9/8. And 12/8, Surely God is Able. If you guys listen to Aretha Franklin, that's in 12/8. Something that I like to do with some of my kids, this is another classroom activity, is finding a song and then finding the rhythm of the song. So any song, I'll just drop the needle, play a song, and we have to find the rhythm, and we have to define the beat. So that's something that kids can do to really listen and educate their ears, excuse me, educate their ears on what they're hearing and how they're hearing it and how it corresponds mathematically. Just a reference for you, simple time signatures, duple, triple, and quadruple, and compound time, excuse me, compound time signatures. I'm gonna keep moving because I don't wanna run out of time. Here we have some rhythm studies. And these are rhythm studies that I do, excuse me. These are rhythm studies that I do with my kids on how to count things. And I think I sent some of these worksheets to you guys because for whatever reason, when I was scanning it, it just came out fuzzy. So if you want to clap with me, our first number 21 rhythm study is in 4/4. And the way that we would count that is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Another way that I like to divide it up when I have multiple kids in a room is one kid is going to count the quarter notes and one kid is going to count the eighth note. Now, if you remember, the quarter notes are 2 eighth notes. So instead of it being 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, it would just be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm going to count the quarter notes and I'm going to try to clap the eighth notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And doing that helps the kids realize how many of what goes into what. So there's all kinds of different versions of it here, but it's a fun worksheet to do with kids on recognizing rhythm and making music percussively. You can make music percussively with the math of rhythm. Forgive me, I have a dry throat. Here's another example with compound meter. So for those of you who are music teachers, just another example for you guys. Another diagram about simple, duple, and quadruple, and complex meter. Just a diagram for your guys' reference. And that's it. That is the presentation I have. And you can go down a crazy, excuse me, forgive me, I'm about to say crazy a million times here, but you can go down such a rabbit hole for music and math. I wanted to make it easy, and I wanted to make it accessible for everybody. So does anybody have any questions now that I've gotten out of this? And then I want to get us into a couple of like ideas and things to do. Oh, thank you, Susan. Yes, to have the handout on creating the glasses with water. I will absolutely get that to you today. Does anybody have any questions about anything? I'm going to take a second and give you guys some time if you have any questions. If any of this was confusing, if any of this was, you need more information, please, please, please. I can't, if we were in person, it would be a little easier, but just let me know. Right now, my dogs are making music upstairs. They do bark in tempo. Oh, great. I'm so happy to hear that, Eric. I have a lot more resources that I am more than happy to share with you guys. In fact, what grade levels your lessons are appropriate? Agnes, it's appropriate to all lessons depending on your children. So you can keep it as simple as possible with Mary Had a Little Lamb and write out the numbers and have them sing it in numbers. And this way we get our brains sequentially understanding and finding all kinds of songs with numbers. High school age books on math and music. I have a couple. I will send them over to you guys. I teach 6 or 8. I teach both numerically and Kodak. Yeah, it's the best. I learned numerically. I grew up in Europe, so all of my stuff was numerical. Not, unfortunately, not. It was, a lot of it was Orff, but numerical was the way that I translated over here. And I will tell you that it is very helpful as a session singer to be able to understand the distance between intervals in your head, to know that, like, for example, Mary Had a Little Lamb, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, E, D, C, D, E, 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 is what the melody is going to sound like in your head before you even open your mouth. It's really, really helpful for their spatial relations. Now, that being said, I think I sent you guys a, let me see if I can share this with you guys. Let's see if this is going to be successful. Let's see, share. I'm going to get rid of that. I have some other worksheets for the littles. That I will send to you, and they're I think I sent you guys music and the equivalents of fractions. So let me see if I can share this with you guys. There we go. Share screen. Here's a worksheet for you guys. All right. And it's just identifying, counting out the beats of any melody that you create for your kids. Name the notes, identify the the equivalent fractions of the notes and add whatever fractions you want. And this having to do with, again, identifying the notes and fractions in the pie. So giving them a space too, that they can spatially relate it to and not just theoretically equate it. Here's another thing, music and fraction checklist. So using all these notes and giving them this reference sheet. It's a really fun way for me to figure out what my kids are having problems with and having them understand the math of this. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing this and I'm gonna share something else. Time signature, here we go. Share screen. Forgive me, I feel a little incompetent as far as this technology goes. I'm still learning Zoom. But I have, I'm not sure if I shared this with you, but in this screen here, we have time signatures. And this is a really great 6-page resource. So having the kids determine the time signature and write it in the box, again, using fractions and using counting. So multiple worksheets with different kinds. If you have older kids who understand dotted rhythms, for those of you that don't know dotted rhythms, the dot indicates that it gets an additional half of the value of the note. So for example, the note that is right here is called a quarter note. It gets 1 beat, but because it gets a dot, it also gets half of that beat. So it gets 1.5 beats. So again, breaking things down and being able to, that's for me, that's the hardest thing for my kids to understand, those dots, those half beats. Further down, we have a half note, which gets 2 beats, but because of the dot, it gets an added beat. So it's a 3-beated note. So dividing those things up are really hard for my kids. That's division and the multiplication of it is really hard. And so as you see, I've given, I think I've sent this to you guys. If I haven't, I will. These are worksheets that I love to use to help the kids like really get their math in order. And then finally, I had a fun little activity for us to do, which was screen share. This is a song that has been in my head for days. I have a kid who is learning Take On Me. I'm pretty sure most of you guys know this song. It was this big techno song back in the 80s. I had friends who loved this song. And something that I love to do with songs like this, any song that you know, 2 things. 1, counting the rhythm. So let's see if we can count this rhythm together. And then 2, identifying the notes and identifying the intervals. So for example, if this is going to be our first note, what's the difference between here and here? So we would count 1, 2, 3. It's a third apart. It's an interval of a third. And then what happens next? 1, 2, 3, an interval of a third, right? So you can either go making C1 or making however you want to do it. If you are a music teacher, you know, make home, you know where to make home, right? So, but just working with kids who do not have a music background, if we're going to go 5, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? 5, 5, 3, 1, 1, right? Because we have a break there. So we would just count it out, right? And continue counting that way. The other way we can do it is with rhythm. So if we're gonna clap this, I'm gonna try to sing this and clap this at the same time. It's been a minute. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. You guys know the song, right? So that being said, fun things like this to do, take a song that they know that they like on the radio and use it as something to clap with. Take an aria and clap along with it. A fun one is Rossini's Barber's Seville Overture. Finding where the beat is. Where is the pulse? That'll help kids tremendously because some kids are going to, and they're counting the smaller division of the beat, right? So these are just some fun things to do with the kids as far as making music mathematical. I had a for the other teachers, I know we're running out of time. I'm 3 minutes. So I'm going to open this up to questions from you guys. But I will send this to Andrea. I have a 2-minute video that I got off of YouTube about the geometry of math that I think is absolutely fascinating. If there are no questions, I'll play it for you, but I'm going to stop sharing right now and see if there are any questions. I'm going to give you guys a couple seconds to put in some questions. Otherwise, I'm just going to end with playing this geometry of math video because I think it's fascinating.
We have a
Hi, Yoon.
geometry math video, please.
Do the math video. Okay, I'm going to do the math video. All right, give me 1 second. All right. Here we go. Share screen.
Pythagoras, the Ionian Greek philosopher and mathematician, is often credited with devising our Western system of music. The 12-note Pythagorean system evolved to become the equal-tempered chromatic scale that we use today. The geometry of music is astounding and beautiful, but it is also helpful in learning and understanding music. A circle, for example, represents a perfect octave. The 12 points of a regular dodecagon align perfectly with the 12 notes of the chromatic scale. Connecting these points with straight lines creates a dodecagram. Any line connecting 2 points on the circle represents an interval, the simplest form of chord. Triangles represent triads, augmented, major, minor, and diminished. Tetragons, or quadrilaterals, like squares, diamonds, rectangles, kites, and various trapezoids, represent tetrachords, major seventh, minor seventh, dominant seventh, minor seventh flat 5, dominant seventh flat 5, diminished seventh, and augmented seventh, some of the most commonly used chords in music. Pentagons represent pentatonic scales, major, minor, modal, and others, and pentachords, with the major, minor, and dominant ninth being the most common. Hexagons represent hexatonic scales, such as the whole tone and minor half step. Heptagons represent heptatonic scales, the most commonly used scales and modes. Heptagons also represent tetrachords with upper structure triads. Octagons represent octatonic scales, such as diminished scales and some dense octachords. Larger polygons represent larger scales, nonatonic, decatonic, and hendecatonic. The 12-sided dodecagon is the largest polygon used in music and represents the full chromatic scale. Chords and scales are transposed by rotating shapes around their center and transformed by reflection over one or more of 12 possible axes or mirror planes. Transformation is a form of musical cubism, like the cubism of Picasso, where the subject is painted or material is sculpted from multiple perspectives. In an upcoming video, we will explore the symmetry of music and expand on cubism. Until then, have a nice day.
All right, so that was, I thought that was absolutely fascinating, and he does a much better job than I do of, forgive me, he does a much better job than I do of explaining geometry. It was never my favorite thing, but it's another way that you can use the circle of fifths that I had shared with you before to, when he was talking about triangles being like C, E, G, E, C, a lot of exercises that we do in singing, you can also make triangles out of those. And when you turn them, it'll give you the transposition. So remember when we were talking before about pivoting on chords and things like that and going to a new key? That's a different way that you can look at it spatially with geometry. Anyway, well, that's my show, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it did not make your brain come out of your ear, because I know a lot of this is kind of dense. So I am more than happy to field any questions. If you have, send me an email or whatever, or through Andrea. I will send you guys about how to build the glass harmonica. and I will send you the other resources that I had mentioned. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope that there were some takeaways that you could have from it, and just another way to make music and math interesting. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Nani. I do want to open it up for questions in case there's anything. I know a lot of that was amazing content, but we might have like maybe a question or two if you have a second.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Thank you, Eric. I love music and math too.
Yeah.
I will get you some math, those time signatures and the other math problems with fractions and stuff. Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Well, if nobody has any questions, then we will let Nani go. But I do want to do so everybody, please feel free to chime in, and thank you. We're really good today.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Starting at 2 o'clock, we will have Heidi Deckler. She sent us a video ahead of time, and then she'll chime in at the end for questions if you have any after the video. So we'll start at 2 o'clock with that. And thank you again, Nani. That was awesome. I learned math. I learned music. I am really excited to try those things out. So thanks very much.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Yay.